The Crips stormed a barbershop. They never imagined who the barber really was. The afternoon sun cut through the dusty windows of Marcus's barbershop on Crenshaw Boulevard, casting long shadows across the checkerboard floor. The smell of aftershave and hair tonic mixed with the faint scent of street tacos from the vendor outside. Marcus Williams stood behind his chair, scissors in hand, carefully shaping up a young customer's fade. At 42 years old, Marcus had owned this shop for nearly a decade, building a reputation as one of the best barbers in south-central Los Angeles. His hands moved with practiced precision, each snip deliberate and sure. The radio played old-school R&B, and the conversation in the shop flowed easily between Marcus, his customer, and two other men waiting their turn. They talked about the Lakers, about rising rent prices, about whose grandmother made the best sweet potato pie. It was the kind of comfortable rhythm that comes from years of the same routine, the same faces, the same small corner of the world. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now, let's get back to it. Marcus had learned long ago that a barbershop was more than just a place for haircuts. It was a sanctuary, a confessional, a community center. Men came here not just to look good, but to feel heard, to belong. He'd built something real here, something honest. After everything he'd been through, after all the years of running and hiding and trying to forget, this shop represented peace. It represented a second chance. But peace never lasts forever in neighborhoods like this. The first sign of trouble was the sudden silence from the street. Marcus's instincts, honed by years he tried to forget, picked up on it immediately. The usual sounds, car horns, children playing, people calling to each other, all went quiet at once. He paused mid-cut, his eyes flicking toward the window. His customer, a college kid named Devon, noticed the change in his demeanor. "Everything good, Mr. Williams?" Devon asked. Before Marcus could answer, a dark blue Impala screeched to a stop directly in front of the shop. Then another. 3 cars total, blocking the street. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew those cars. Everyone in the neighborhood knew those cars. The doors opened, and 6 men stepped out, all wearing blue bandanas, all with that particular walk that marked them as soldiers. Crips. The 83rd Street Crips, to be specific. Marcus recognized their leader immediately, a young man in his mid-20s named Dante, all hard angles and harder eyes, with the kind of swagger that came from never being told no. "Everybody stay calm," Marcus said quietly, setting down his scissors. The other customers exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew what this was. Protection money, intimidation. The gang had been expanding their territory, pressuring every business to pay tribute or face consequences. The door burst open, and Dante walked in first, followed by his crew. They spread out, blocking the exits, their hands resting conspicuously near their waistbands, where guns bulged under baggy shirts. The small shop suddenly felt impossibly crowded. "Marcus Williams," Dante said, his voice carrying that particular mix of respect and threat that gang enforcers perfected. "Heard you've been operating on our block without showing proper respect. That's disrespectful, old man. Real disrespectful." Marcus stood perfectly still, his face neutral. "I pay my rent. I pay my taxes. I don't have trouble with anyone." Dante laughed, and his crew joined in on cue. "See, that's where you're wrong. This is our neighborhood. We provide protection. Keep things safe for businesses like yours. That costs money, $2,000 a month, starting today." "I can't afford that," Marcus replied evenly. "Then maybe you can't afford to keep this shop." Dante picked up a bottle of aftershave from the counter and examined it. "Be a shame if something happened to this nice place you got here, real shame." One of Dante's crew, a stocky kid with teardrop tattoos, moved toward Devon, still sitting in Marcus's chair. "Maybe we start by showing you we serious." That's when everything changed. Marcus moved with a speed that seemed impossible for a man his age. Before the gang member could touch Devon, Marcus had crossed the distance, his hand snapping out to grab the kid's wrist. The movement was precise, economical, the kind that came from years of training. He twisted, and the gang member went down hard, crying out in pain. The shop exploded into chaos. Another Crip reached for his gun, but Marcus was already moving. He released the first attacker and spun, his elbow catching the second man in the throat. The man stumbled back, gasping. A third rushed forward, and Marcus sidestepped, using the attacker's momentum to send him crashing into the mirror, which shattered spectacularly. Dante backed up, his eyes wide with shock. What the... But Marcus wasn't done. A fourth gang member came at him with a knife, a wild slash that would have gutted most men. Marcus caught the arm, broke it with a sharp twist, and disarmed him in one fluid motion. The knife clattered to the floor. The whole thing had taken maybe 15 seconds. Now Marcus stood in the center of his shop, breathing steady, surrounded by 4 gang members writhing on the ground. Only Dante and one other remained standing, both having pulled their guns, but seeming uncertain about using them. The confidence had drained from Dante's face, replaced by confusion and, for the first time, fear. "Who the hell are you?" Dante whispered. Marcus's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth it usually carried. "Someone you shouldn't have messed with. Now get your boys and get out of my shop." But Dante's pride wouldn't let him leave like this. He'd been humiliated in front of his crew. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, old man. You think you're some kind of martial arts master or something? You're gonna need more than fancy moves when we come back with the whole set." "Then bring them," Marcus said quietly. "But know this, I gave up a certain kind of life a long time ago. Don't make me go back to it." There was something in his eyes, something that made Dante's finger hesitate on the trigger, some instinct, some primal recognition of a predator wearing the disguise of prey. He backed toward the door, helping his injured crew to their feet. "This ain't over, not even close." As they stumbled out, one of them turned back, his face twisted with pain and rage. "You dead, Barber, dead man walking." The Impalas screeched away, leaving burned rubber and shattered glass. Marcus stood in the wreckage of his shop, the afternoon sun still streaming through the windows, now highlighting the destruction. Devon and the other customers stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "Mr. Williams," Devon said slowly, "what just happened? How did you—" Marcus picked up a broom and began sweeping up the broken glass. His hands were steady, but something had changed in his expression. The mask of the friendly neighborhood barber had cracked, revealing glimpses of something else underneath. "Go home, Devon," he said softly. "All of you, go home. Shop's closed for today." As the customers filed out, stealing glances back at him, Marcus continued cleaning, but his mind was far away, dragged back to a past he'd spent 10 years trying to bury. He looked at his reflection in what remained of the mirror, seeing not the barber, but the man he used to be. Before he was Marcus Williams, owner of a modest barbershop in South Central, before he learned to cut hair and laugh with customers and pretend he was just another man trying to make an honest living. Before all of that, he had another name, another life, and that life was about to come knocking. The sun dipped lower, painting the shop in shades of amber and red. Marcus locked the door and pulled down the security gate, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Not against what was coming. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment, then dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. This number shouldn't exist. "It's me," Marcus said. A long pause. "Jesus Christ, Marcus, is that really you? I need help, Frank. They're coming." "Who's coming?" Marcus looked out at the street, where the Crips' tire marks still scarred the asphalt. "Everyone who finds out who I really am." That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in his small apartment above the shop, a pistol on the table in front of him. Not a street gun, but a precision military-grade weapon he'd kept hidden for years, hoping he'd never need it again. Through the thin walls he could hear the sounds of the neighborhood. Distant sirens, music from the bodega down the street, couples arguing, children crying, normal sounds, the sounds of life continuing while his own threatened to unravel. His phone buzzed. A text from Frank. "On my way. ETA 6 hours. Don't do anything stupid." Marcus almost laughed. Stupid had been thinking he could ever really escape. Stupid had been believing that a decade of cutting hair and keeping his head down would erase what he'd been. The army had recruited him at 18, pulled him from the same streets he now called home, and turned him into something else. Special forces, black ops. The kind of soldier who didn't officially exist, who did jobs that would never make the news, in countries whose names couldn't be spoken. He'd been good at it. Too good. For 12 years he'd been the military's scalpel, precise and lethal, deployed in shadows and silence. But there was a cost to being that weapon. Every mission took something from him, chipped away pieces of his humanity until he looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back. So he'd left, cashed in favors, disappeared into the bureaucratic cracks, and rebuilt himself as Marcus Williams. But you can't really kill who you were. You can only bury it and hope it stays buried. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of engines outside. Marcus moved to the window and looked down at the street. It was past midnight now, and a convoy of cars had gathered, not just a few this time, but at least a dozen. The Crips had brought reinforcements. Dante stood in the middle of them all, gesturing and shouting, working his soldiers into a frenzy. They were planning to torch the shop. Marcus could see the gasoline cans, the baseball bats, the guns. This wasn't about protection money anymore. This was about reputation. Dante had been embarrassed, and in gang culture, that required blood. Marcus checked his weapon, then stopped himself. If he went down there with a gun, people would die. Probably a lot of people. And once he started down that path, there'd be no coming back. The man he'd fought so hard to bury would take over completely. Instead, he grabbed his phone and called 911. "There's about to be a riot on Crenshaw Boulevard," he said calmly, giving the address. "Multiple armed individuals. You might want to send units." Then he went downstairs, unarmed, and opened the security gate. The crowd saw him and went quiet. Dante stepped forward, a baseball bat in his hands, a savage smile on his face. "Thought you could hide up there. Thought we'd just forget. Nobody puts hands on my crew and lives to talk about it." "You don't want to do this," Marcus said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried across the street. "I don't want anyone to get hurt. Just walk away." "Walk away?" Dante laughed, but there was a manic edge to it. "You really don't get it, do you, old man? This is about respect. About showing everyone what happens when you disrespect the Crips. We're going to destroy everything you built, and then we're going to destroy you." The crowd pressed forward, and Marcus stood his ground. He could take down 5, maybe 10 of them before they overwhelmed him, but there were too many. And he'd made a promise to himself when he left that life. No more killing, no more blood on his hands. He'd rather die as Marcus Williams, barber, than live as the weapon he used to be. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Dante heard them too. "Cops!" someone shouted. The crowd began to fracture, members peeling away toward their cars. But Dante stood firm, his pride and rage keeping him rooted. "This ain't over," he snarled. "Cops can't protect you forever. We'll be back, again and again, until you're gone." 3 police cruisers skidded around the corner, lights flashing. Officers poured out, hands on their weapons. "Everyone disperse, now!" The Crips scattered like roaches in light, engines roaring as they fled into the night. But Marcus knew Dante was right. They'd be back. And next time, they'd be smarter about it. More careful, more lethal. An officer approached Marcus. "You call this in?" "Yes, sir." "You okay? You hurt?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm fine. Thank you for responding so quickly." The officer looked at the shop, at the broken window, then back at Marcus. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you. We can arrest a few of them if they're dumb enough to come back tonight, but this won't stop. The Crips own this territory. If they've marked you, you need to either pay up or leave." "That's just reality." "I understand. Do you?" "Because I've seen what happens when people try to stand up to them. It doesn't end well." The officer's voice softened. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save your life." Marcus nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, I really do." After the police left, leaving behind a single cruiser for the rest of the night, Marcus went back upstairs. His phone showed a new message from Frank. 3 hours out. Hold tight." But Marcus wasn't sure he had 3 hours. He sat by the window watching the street and let himself think about the years he'd tried to forget, about the missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, places that weren't even on the map, about his team, brothers in arms who'd trusted him with their lives, about the day he'd decided he couldn't do it anymore, couldn't be that person anymore. He'd thought becoming a barber was a kind of penance, a way to give back, to create instead of destroy, to build community instead of tearing it down. For a decade it had worked. He'd been happy or something close to it. Now that peace was crumbling and he had to decide, let it all go or fight to protect it. The first light of dawn was breaking when Frank's pickup truck pulled up outside. Marcus watched as a man in his 50s, built like a bear and moving with the same careful grace Marcus possessed, climbed out and looked up at the window. Their eyes met, and 10 years vanished in an instant. Frank was at the door 2 minutes later, and Marcus let him in. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, two soldiers who'd survived hell together. "You look old," Frank said. "You look worse," Marcus replied. Then they embraced, a brief but fierce hug that said everything words couldn't. When they separated, Frank surveyed the shop. "So this is what you've been doing, cutting hair. It's honest work. Honest work that's about to get you killed." Frank's expression was serious. "Tell me everything." Marcus laid it out, the protection racket, the confrontation, his instinctive response, the gang's promise of revenge. Frank listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. "You showed them what you can do," Frank said finally. "That was a mistake. Now they know you're not just some barber. They're going to dig, and when gangs dig, they find things. Street networks talk. Someone's going to remember a Black Ops soldier named Marcus Johnson, who disappeared 10 years ago. And when that happens, you won't just have the Crips after you." Marcus knew he was right. His old identity, Marcus Johnson, was supposed to be buried in classified files. But nothing stayed buried forever. Other enemies, people he'd crossed in other countries, other lives, they'd come looking too. "So what do I do?" Marcus asked. "Run again? Change my name again? How many times can I run before I forget who I really am?" "Or you stand and fight," Frank said. "Not alone this time. I made calls on the drive. The team, what's left of us, they remember what you did for them. They're willing to help. But Marcus, you need to understand what that means. If we do this, if we go to war with a gang in the middle of Los Angeles, there's no coming back from it. You'll never be just a barber again." The sun was fully up now, streaming through the windows. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up. People heading to work, kids walking to school, life continuing its relentless march forward. Marcus thought about Devon, about all the young men who'd sat in his chair over the years, sharing their dreams and fears. He thought about the community he'd become part of, the second family he'd built. "I'm not running anymore," he said quietly. "This is my home. These are my people. If the Crips want it, they'll have to go through me." Frank nodded slowly. "Then we do this smart. We don't just survive, we end it completely, no half measures. No killing," Marcus said firmly. "I made a promise." "Even if it means they kill you? Even then," Frank sighed. "You always were the stubborn one. All right, we'll do it your way. But that means we need leverage, information, and a plan. The Crips are organized, funded, and vicious. If we're going to take them down without killing anyone, we need to be better." They spent the next several hours planning. Frank made calls, reaching out to old contacts. Marcus pulled up everything he could find on the 83rd Street Crips, their structure, their leadership, their businesses both legal and illegal. The gang was deep into the neighborhood, with connections to drug trafficking, gun running, and money laundering. Dante was just a lieutenant, a foot soldier with aspirations. The real power lay with a man named Vincent Ghost Martinez, who ran the operation from a house in Baldwin Hills. "We need eyes on Ghost," Frank said. "Need to know his operation inside and out. Then we dismantle it piece by piece. Take away his money, his guns, his soldiers' loyalty, make him vulnerable. And then? Then we give him a choice. Leave this neighborhood alone, or we expose everything to the feds. We've got contacts in DEA, ATF, FBI. We can bury him in investigations." It was a good plan. Clean, minimal violence, maximum impact. But it required time, and time was something Marcus didn't have. The Crips would be back tonight, he was certain of it. They'd probe his defenses, test his resolve, push until something broke. Marcus opened the shop at noon despite Frank's protests. "Life goes on," he said. "I'm not hiding." To his surprise, customers came. Not as many as usual, but enough. They'd heard about the confrontation, seen the broken window now covered with plywood. They came out of loyalty, out of curiosity, out of that stubborn neighborhood pride that refuses to be intimidated. Devon was among them. He sat in Marcus's chair, eyes wide. "Mr. Williams, everyone's talking about what happened. People are saying you're like some kind of action hero or something." Marcus focused on the haircut, his hands steady. "I'm just a barber, Devon. But I learned a long time ago that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. Nobody else is going to do it for you." "But how did you... I mean, the way you moved..." "I was in the military," Marcus said. "It was the truth, or part of it. They taught me how to handle myself. The Crips are going to come back, aren't they?" "Probably." Devon was quiet for a moment. "My older brother runs with them. Not the 83rd Street set, but still Crips. He says Dante's making a big deal out of this. Says he's embarrassed and needs to prove himself. They're talking about making an example." Marcus met Devon's eyes in the mirror. "You should stay away from here for a while." "No way," Devon said with surprising firmness. "You've been cutting my hair since I was 12. You helped me with my college applications, wrote me a recommendation letter. I'm not abandoning you now." It was a small thing, but it meant everything. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. This was why he'd become a barber, why he'd chosen this life. Connection, community, mattering to people in a way that wasn't about violence or fear. "I appreciate that," he said softly. "More than you know." That evening, as the sun set and Marcus prepared to close the shop, Frank's phone buzzed. He listened for a moment, his expression darkening, then hung up. "We've got a problem. One of my contacts just heard chatter. Dante didn't just go to Ghost about you. He asked for permission to do a full hit. Ghost approved it. They're coming tonight with everything they've got." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd expected this. "Then we make our stand." "Marcus..." "I'm not running, Frank, not anymore." The two men looked at each other, a lifetime of shared experience passing between them. Finally, Frank nodded. "All right. Then we prepare. The team's 2 hours out. We hold until they get here." They spent those hours reinforcing the shop, setting up defensive positions, planning fields of fire. Marcus moved through the space, seeing it with new eyes, not as a place of peace, but as a battlefield. Every corner, every angle, every potential entry point became tactical. As midnight approached, the street grew quiet again, that unnatural silence that preceded violence. Marcus stood behind the counter, Frank at his side, both of them armed now, but hoping they wouldn't need to use the weapons. Then the cars came. Not just a few this time, but a convoy. 20 vehicles at least, blocking both ends of the street. The Crips poured out like a dark tide, at least 50 strong, all armed, all ready for war. Dante stood at the front, a semi-automatic rifle in his hands. Next to him was an older man, late 30s, with the kind of presence that marked him as someone important. Ghost, Marcus realized. The big boss had come personally to witness this. Ghost raised a megaphone. "Marcus Williams, you've got one chance. Come out now, kneel, apologize to my lieutenant, and maybe I let you live. Or stay in there and burn with your shop. Your choice. You've got 5 minutes." Marcus looked at Frank, then at the shop around him. 10 years of his life. His community. His peace. All of it about to go up in flames unless he surrendered his dignity or unleashed the weapon he'd tried so hard to leave behind. 4 minutes, Ghost's voice echoed.